coherence is this ephemeral, emergent property, best never named, never subject to reality tunnel capture, like it's that thing. Then how the hell do you scale it? Because we're storytelling monkeys, and at some point we need recipes to help the thing propagate.
So this goes
unless
back to
everybody's
the
just
question of
Yoda Zen.
Why does it always break down? Mm-hmm. Why every time we try to scale does it break down? One of the reasons is because, as our friend Lao Tzu discovered, and by the way, also our friend Buddha discovered, and our friend Jesus discovered, every time the storytelling monkeys try to turn into a story to tell, they fuck it up. So let's be mindful of that and recognize that the storytelling piece of it definitely isn't the answer. Okay, so Sherlock Holmes style. We've now carved that out of the available portfolio of things that we can do. How do we go about doing anything at all that doesn't involve being a storytelling monkey? Okay, we've got a narrow problem. It's smaller. It's a smaller space.
But so let's just think. I mean, if where we are culturally these days is a lot of people are stumbling into these spaces via broad access to ecstatic technologies. So whether that's transformational festivals or transformational technologies or whatever it is, or psychopharmacology, all these things, people are bumbling into these spaces on purpose or not. They're getting there. They're recognizing, holy shit, we're in the deep end. And or this is rad, this is awesome, this is terrifying, this is powerful, right? Whatever it will be, they know it when they're getting there, even if they're not 100% sure of how they got there. And then the moment they're no longer in that coherent field, we're back to trying to make sense of it in the prison house of language, telling stories and making analogies or metaphors.
So let's make a distinction. I think this distinction is quite helpful. There's at least two distinct uses of language. This one over here, I'll call semantic reality mapping. This is really good for things like building houses or putting together battle plans. It orients coordinated behavior where the checksum of reality is pretty strong. Science does a lot of this. Science is pretty much this kind of thing. Over here is poetry, parable, where the finger's pointing to the moon, and the point is the moon, not the finger. This we can use. We just have to be very careful that we're not doing this. So the problem that I think happens all the time, particularly with the folks who wear lots of feathers and like to take too many drugs, is they do this. So they have an experience, and then try to turn it into a science.
So it's prescriptive versus descriptive.
Both, really.
They mistake one for the other.
They do prescription and description, because poetry is not really description, it's evocative.
Figurative versus literal.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So the trick is we have to actually be able to use language as some way of creating a resonance frequency or protocol match that generates a capacity for communication that is not itself specifically semantic, which I would propose both parable and poetry do. It orients you in the direction of a feeling in yourself. Like, think about poetry. When you read a poem, you don't understand the poem, but there's something about the way that the poem coordinates language helps you orient in yourself to an experience that feels like the feeling that the poet was also feeling. And so it creates a possibility of there being a connection at the level of interior feeling, not a connection at the level of understanding.
Well, something it felt like you did have some future forward practicality and application in your initial description. You said it does well with novelty and it's anti-fragile. And those may, as you've thought of it, feel like timeless qualities, but it for sure feels important now and going forward. And I was wondering, because if we can't do here's the instructions on how to get back here, because then we've named a thing that's not the thing. And emergent coherence is kind of this weird, slippery thing to pin down. You have communities of practice, like Quakers and others, that have spent centuries and even generations passing on that knowledge. I was just with some indigenous folks, Diné and Lakota folks, right? And they have an infinite tradition of, we will talk until the thing that needed to get done emerges. But nor are we on the clock. And if this takes 10 minutes, so be it. If this takes 10 days, so be it. So is there a version of this that is, kind of quote unquote scalable in the 21st century for our current situations and conditions, and also nervous systems and timescales?